Hello and welcome to the next class. I'm Rob Birdsell, your host. Very glad to have you all with us. We have two great guests. One is a second timer, a two-time guest on the next class, joining the amazing crowd of Father Foley and Jeb Bush. Josh Hale is one of three second-time guests in the next class. Josh, welcome back.
Great to be back. I don't know what I did the first time, other than maybe I failed, and so I'm getting a second attempt. So I appreciate that.
No, it's great to have you back. As our listeners may recall, Josh is the CEO of the Big Shoulders Fund in Chicago. We'll have him give us a brief overview of Big Shoulders in a second. And then Chandler, welcome to the next class.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Chiz is the longtime headmaster at Salisbury School, boys boarding school in Connecticut, and brings to us a lot of leadership experience. But let's start with Josh. Josh, for our listeners, just give a quick overview of your work at Big Shoulders.
Big Shoulders Fund is a charitable nonprofit organization. It was started back in the late 80s, 1986. To support Catholic schools in under-resourced, underrepresented communities in Chicago. And so schools where there are 20% or more living in poverty and Title I eligible, and helping those schools to really succeed. So that today means we serve 72 schools in Chicago, primarily on the south and west side. A few of those are up in Waukegan, but those 72 schools have close to 20,000 children. 80% identify as children of color, and about 73% are living at or below poverty. We recently expanded our program. We're now working in Northwest Indiana. We have 20 schools we work with there, and they are very similar to schools we worked with over the years in terms of population served. But also, we really provide scholarships, so access, a lot of programmatic and operational, so professional development, academics, leadership pipeline. And then we also focus a fair amount on enrichment for students, ensuring that they continue on trajectory towards success in life. And perhaps the two most significant things is our model has continued to evolve. We now have entered into about 4 years ago, a legal agreement with the Archdiocese. We're helping to manage 37 of our network of schools. And so really working more closely with a group of principals and leaders to really strengthen the network and to ensure that they not only are viable, but they become stronger and continue to remain strong community-based organizations. And the second really critical thing is that these children succeed at high levels. Our students ultimately are graduating college at 2 times the national rate. For our Black alumni, that number would be close to 3%, 3 times the national rate. And for our Latino alumni, 4 times the national rate, and they go on to become great citizens.
Josh, that's awesome. And on our previous episode, we had a friend of both yours and mine, Katie Everett, talking about exactly that management organization. 37 is a lot of schools. How do you manage 37 schools so you don't become a district? You don't become what Katie was saying is just an impossible task.
Yeah, it's an interesting case study at some point that we have evolved into this. We didn't wake up one day and say we're gonna run schools, we're gonna manage schools. We evolved into it, and our structure lent towards more project-based management. So it started with working with principals on specific issues. So it might be around financial management, marketing enrollment, reading scores are low, so professional development. It might have to do with we're not able to attract and retain teachers, help us. So it's project-based. And so the way we are able to effectively manage without creating large bureaucracy is really sharing talent across the network from our team and working in multiple situations on an ongoing basis. So there's a project manager, and then there's subject matter experts that move across schools. I would say the other part is we always talk about, we try to have the network feed off itself, that we are trying to employ teachers and leaders in our schools to help work with one another to manage and grow the network. And so that means we're able to pay people more because they're going out and working, whether that's creating professional learning communities, or that is distributing a leader. So Chiz is a great leader in one school. Why don't we distribute his leader over multiple schools? And underneath that, we have apprenticeship. So really trying to strengthen it in different ways. But I would say, at a high level, there's a much smarter team at Big Shoulders Fund who manages all that. They don't let me get too close to the academics. They're concerned about my IQ. But I've observed how they do that. And so, but we are really trying to not fall in the trap of, we have all the answers at headquarters, and the answers are in the community. Each community is unique, and allow them to tell us the issues and try to come back with solutions that then can be shared across the network.
So like Christina, who's going to be joining the Eiley seminar, she now oversees 3 schools.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And under her, she has apprentice leaders.
Yes. So we can go back with Christine. So that's a great example. So we got to know her early in her career. She was a teacher, certainly had leadership qualities. Our team had identified her and said, we want to help support. And she was interested in growing. And so we made her a lead teacher in a professional learning community, working with other teachers and, a data coach or a literacy coach, whoever was working with them. And then she moved up into other leaders. She worked with us on our Stattle camp in Wyoming, or, she worked in some sort of STEM program. And then she took on being an assistant principal, then ultimately a principal. And then because she was so effective as a principal, it's called Sullivan Fellows, but I would call it the YPO of principals, that we identified 6 key performance indicators across our schools. And it has to do with, culture and climate, as the 5 essentials, academic scores, absolute growth, enrollment, stability or growth, alumni fundraising, matriculation, so 8th grade onto high quality high school, or high school onto college or career. And on those KPIs, the principals that rise up, we actually put them into this group called Sullivan Fellows. She is one of them. And then they are, we compensate them more. And there's a kicker if they make it 5 years, and then it resets. But they also get professional coaching and supports along the way as part of that group. And so she really continued to develop, and we saw that, and we said we should put her into a new role of managing 2 schools, now ultimately 3. We've done that now probably in 4 or 5 instances, and it's been enormously helpful because we put a resident underneath those Sullivan Fellows, and they get a year or 2 to learn from a high-performing principal before they're put in the position. In the past, it was like, someone left, the principal at the school, it was like, any teacher want to be a principal? Or you went to the market and tried to find someone to come in to fit in the culture and climate, which is really difficult. So Christine is a great example of that.
Yeah, I'm excited to have her out at the Eiley seminar in March. She, I think, will be a great contributor. Chiz, Salisbury School, our listeners are mostly Catholic school leaders, but I think there's a lot we can learn from our friends in the private school market. So tell us about the school that you ran for 18 years, I think.
Yeah, I was actually a faculty member before I was appointed headmaster. So I spent 30 plus years, on the Salisbury School campus. And Salisbury is a boys' school founded in the Episcopal tradition. We have a chapel program, community service, and other programs that are similar to what you might find at a Catholic school. Mostly boarding, 300 students, 150 employees, about a $20 million annual budget when I left 3 years ago, and really exciting work. And I really enjoyed a really fabulous career there, and I'm very grateful.
And some of our listeners may not be aware that there are a number of Catholic boarding schools. Chiz and I, through our work at Amerigo, work with Villanova Prep, Woodside Priory, Marionopolis, Georgetown Prep, all long tradition Catholic boarding schools. So they have been in that business too. But
there's a neighbor of ours in Connecticut known Canterbury School in New Milford, which is a Catholic boarding school. Very good school.
Interesting. Okay. So let's get into our discussion today. So Josh, you obviously work with a lot of school leaders. Chiz, you were one for a long time. The job has gotten a lot harder from the leaders that I work with over the past 5 years. Can Can you talk about why it's gotten harder and what you see as the greatest challenges school leaders face today? And Chiz, why don't we start with you?
Um, in the independent school world and the boarding school world where I functioned, there's no question that the last 25 years has seen dramatic change in how one runs a school. I'll cite a couple of things. As a result, though, it's interesting to note that when I retired from my job after 18 years, I was called a dinosaur by by the headhunter who was tasked with finding my replacement. And I always thought that was funny because independent schools like Salisbury really prize continuity, tradition, and um, but the challenges of leading a school have resulted in, I think, the average tenure of a independent school leader now in our space is like 5 to 7 years.
I would
And I
say
know
the same.
we're going to talk about fundraising later, but that has a direct impact on fundraising. I mean, one of the things when I first became headmaster at Salisbury, I was 37 years old. I hadn't done a lot of fundraising, and it takes a while to learn how to do that. And the biggest part of fundraising for me was building relationships with your key donors. And I know we're going to talk about fundraising later, but when we're talking about challenges of how it's changed, that's not a good thing for independent schools, in my opinion. I think continuity is really good for schools. It allows you to really project, whether it's on your social media or on your website or anything, who you are, what your mission is, and it doesn't change as new school leaders go in and out the door. The other thing that I saw as changing over those 20 years was the role of the board in leading a school. When I was fortunate enough to be appointed at Salisbury, I had a great board chair who said, "Look, this is your school. I'm here to support you. Um, let's talk whenever you want to talk, but I'm your wingman, but I'm not going to tell you how to run the place."
Hmm.
Which was so refreshing and a little scary too, because he basically lobbed it all on my shoulders. But I loved it, and then what I saw over the past 25 years and the time that I was head is more encroachment on that line between governance and management. The headmaster or the head of school is supposed to manage, and the board is supposed to govern, and those lines are tricky, and with different cultural upheavals and so on, and the political culture, it got crazy, and so those were some of the things that I noticed. And um, we were so lucky at Salisbury. The parent body was terrific. They believed in the school. They believed in the leadership of the school. Very, very little parental interference. Being a boarding school, you don't see parents every day, so that's different than being a Catholic day school. But and the kids were fabulous. They didn't change. That was the one
Hmm.
constant. And whenever I had a tough day, I would kind of get up from my desk and leave the office and walk around, usually in the afternoon, and kids are playing sports or whatever, and it would remind me of why I was there and why I loved my job. It was all about the kids.
I love that, Chiz. That final comment. I can just see you walking around campus and knowing probably every kid's name. Um,
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
that's the joy of the work. It
that's
wasn't the budgets and the working with the board and you know all that kind of minutia. It was face to face, person to person, smile to smile, believing in kids, instilling self confidence. I'll tell you, the best moment of my week was we started our day with chapel twice a week on Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings. And I would stand on the steps of the chapel and shake every boy's hand as he walked in the door and call him by name on purpose to let him know that I knew who he was and that he was loved and that the headmaster had his back. And and I did that with the faculty too. But for the boys, it was such a moment where, if they were mopey because it was early in the morning, and you'd see this smile flash. And then in COVID, we dropped the handshake and went with a fist pump because you weren't supposed to touch it. But just that literally 2 seconds or 3 seconds with a kid where the headmaster would say the boy's name and he would look, we'd look into each other's eyes and know that there was a connection, and he felt, I think, that an adult in his life was really in his court.
That's awesome. And reminds me, Josh, of our friend Father Gartland, who would greet
Same thing.
students every morning. Chiz, he was the second president of the original Cristo Rey School, and he would greet them every morning, and he would say, "Good morning, saints. Good morning, saints."
Yes.
And but he felt it was critical. Same thing. Every morning he was out there greeting them, the head of the school. So great stories, Chiz. Josh, a little different seat. You were, as you mentioned earlier, you're working with school leaders. What have you seen change in the role of the school leader the past few years or 20 years, as Chiz is talking?
Yeah, so a lot of what Chiz said, actually, I was thinking of, there's ideas in there about, I was thinking as he was talking through some of the things he did, there's almost Chiz-isms, that there's things that, like visit, greeting everybody outside and things like that. But just to step back, when I think about what's changed in Catholic schools, I'm not going to dwell on too much because there's a lot there, but at the elementary school level in particular, there's been such a retraction of, just the way that the church has changed, whether it's, support from the parish or from the diocese or archdiocese. It's dramatically changed in that the work didn't go away, the need for it didn't go away, but it was increasingly pushed to the local level, meaning the school, the principal. And so you had a principal whose role was primarily to be the academic lead for a school, who now is in charge of fundraising, spirituality or faith, nurse or security, and just going to list of all the things, technology. And it's not like maybe in a high school or some larger schools, a lot of these principals are asked to do their own. They kind of bootstrap it, and so I think one is just the magnitude of the job has grown, and the expectation for a singular person to be able to do a wide range of things. And any of us who have hired, it's hard to find someone who's good at one or two things, never mind a whole range of things. And so I think that puts a lot of pressure on the job, and so increasingly some, when a principal job opens up, I often hear, can I take this on? Now I do think that's changing. There's so many things happening that have recognized that the job is untenable if not supported. And so, we're working on those things, groups in New York or Philadelphia or, on the list, everybody's trying to find ways to do it. And as always, strong leaders rise up and figure out a way to do it on their own. I mean, they're adjusting to that. And I think that can be lost. But I think in all of that, in a time when the world is increasingly complex and charged in, whether that's, among your faculty and staff or among students or among parents, it is difficult to be a leader in these times. And that doesn't mean that great people can't get into a challenging situation and succeed. But I do think it takes, even more important to build that team, whatever you mean by team, whether it's your council, who do you go to for supports, or it's your kind of management team in the school, however you create that. I also think it takes a hell of a lot of modesty and humility to know what you know and what you don't know. I think I remind myself of that all the time because it's hard. It's hard to. Yeah. And I also think to be reminded that it is a great gift to be a leader. That it is, while it's hard and it's challenging, it's also a great gift. It's soul filling when you get a breakthrough. Chiz, when he referenced, and I think it captures it perfectly, that being a leader means you have to do a lot of minutia, a lot of things that others do not want to do, and it's getting into the minutia of things and solving issues. But it's also that grace of going out and seeing the students flourishing and succeeding, or welcoming them and saying, we've built a great team, we've come together as a community, and I'm a part of helping to develop that. And I think never forgetting those pieces, because there's a lot of dark moments, and going out, like Chiz said, and walking around and being reminded, why am I doing this? I think is tremendous advice. And that, not to oversimplify it, but I think that, in a rapidly changing world, especially in the elementary school Catholic principal, that's in all leadership positions, but I see that particularly. finding that grace and reminding yourself why you jumped in the first place.
Josh, you said something that's so true, and you were, and I forgot to mention it, but the whole idea of the different constituencies that a school leader has to appeal to and work with, and the competing interests within those constituencies. In my job, I had the board 1, the faculty and staff 2, the students 3, the alumni 4, and the parents 5. And
no one has strong opinions.
And in this world that we live in today, those opinions are not only, especially with social media, they're voiced more often and seemingly louder, and it makes it taxing. And the successful school leader is someone who can really, negotiate all those different constituencies and try to appeal and appease all those different constituencies. And you can't do it all the time, because sometimes they're diametrically opposed on a particular issue. But you have to be strong, and you have to spend a lot of time negotiating and listening and compromising.
That's exactly right. I couldn't agree more.
The other thing I'd say about school leaders that I've seen is it's so important for them to hold the role lightly. I've seen so many where the role becomes their identity, and they lose their identity, and they become all encompassing around this job, and they're holding it so tightly because it's become who they are. And Father Creed, Josh, who you've heard of many times, he says that line often: hold it lightly. That it's not your work. In the Catholic schools, it's God's work, and you are an instrument of Him. You're not the job. And
that's exactly right.
I've seen school.
But Rob, the tough part of that is that in order to sometimes do the best job, you have to be that person. And you're totally right. For your own personal health, you also have to hold it lightly. So it's a real paradigm there, and it's a balance.
No, you're right, because you got to be all in.
Yep.
And the faculty have to see that, the kids have to see that, the parents, but you can't be so all in that you lose yourself.
It helps to have a cadre of school leaders to have these discussions with. And we used to meet with different groups of heads, because in the independent school world, and certainly in New England where I was in the boarding school world, there's only one person in that school that has that job. And I assume it's the same thing in the Catholic world. And so to have a affinity group of heads to get together with, to share a meal, just talk for an hour, it is so refreshing, because you remember that other people carry the burden that you carry, and it's even hard to talk with your spouse about it sometimes, because they're not living that role.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They don't get it.
Exactly right.
And it's one of the challenges the diocesan schools face, is that they are true islands. If you're not part of the Big Shoulders network, if you're not part of the Cristo Rey network, if you're not part of the Jesuit schools network, you're an island. A lot of these diocesan schools I work with, they've got no one to talk to, and it's one of the purposes and goals of Hale is to give them that affinity group that they, we meet every month. We met yesterday, and
it's so needed.
Yeah, it's so, and I think it's important to be with the group not in your city, because you can be more vulnerable. If you're on with a school that's down the street, you don't want to be vulnerable, because you got to show that I'm better than you. We're kicking butt here. We're killing it. Whereas if you're talking to a school in LA from Chicago, you can say this is a hard job. And so that's where I think that national. I think Chizzy, you're talking about more of a national network to voice that. Let's take a quick pause here before we come back and talk about, we could go on and on here, but we're going to take a quick pause and hear from our sponsor.
Catholic Virtual is the trusted online education partner of Catholic schools worldwide. We develop customized online learning solutions to meet the needs of our partner schools and their students. Visit our website at www.catholicvirtual.com to learn more. Now back to the episode.
So a big job of a private school leader is fundraising. And in our previous episode, we had a great conversation with Katie Everett about working with foundations. So we'll let her be the expert on that and turn to you two for raising funds from individuals. Chiz, if you could talk about alumni, and then Josh, if you could talk about people that aren't alumni but have an interest in a school. So it's all different strategies. And Chiz, why don't we start with you? And what are best practices, or if you're a young new head of a Catholic school, what would you share with them about raising funds from alumni, and then Josh, other constituents?
Well, the tough truth about that is that you have to get out from behind your desk and off campus and meet interested donors. And my best fundraising was always done with relationships built up over a number of years. So as head of school, I got to understand and um, really know what the donor was interested in, what made him or her tick, and what they cared most about in my school, and kind of wait for the right opportunity to say, oh, I have a funding opportunity, and I know exactly who that the person is who will be interested in that. But cultivating relationships, it's that's it. I mean, my best fundraising successes, I can look back and I almost didn't have to ask the donor for a gift. I would talk about a project that I had, and any project that we initiated, I was incredibly passionate about, whether it was building a new classroom building, or building a new dormitory, or building a new student center, or building a new athletic center at Salisbury. It was because I was enhancing the lives of the students. That was what I was passionate about. I wasn't passionate about being able to say, oh, I did this. What I was passionate about was knowing that I was going to bring something to campus that students would benefit from. It would make their lives richer and more, better and more meaningful. And so I remember when we were building a new 100,000 square foot athletic center. The first two donors I went to for leadership gifts, I just talked about what I wanted to do and was passionate about. And one looked at me and said, "What do you need?" And then it was okay. Then it was time, but to have that conversation, and so it's really about building relationships. It's about getting off campus, and having lunch or tea, or just visiting someone at their business or in their home, and growing that relationship, and establishing a partnership in leading the school, because the head of school and the donors need to work together in order to make those magical moments happen for the school.
Just how much of your time would you say you were off campus?
I used to say that 40% of the time I was actively fundraising. Now you can actively fundraise from your desk with a phone call or an email or a postcard, or anything like that. But I would travel generally 1 week out of every month throughout the school year.
Okay.
And it's hard. And when you're in a campaign, it's a little bit more. When you're not in a campaign, it's a little bit less. We had a very successful campaign that concluded in 2014. And in those months leading up to the finish, I was away a lot, but it paid great dividends. And then after 2014, we let the donor base rest. We weren't constantly asking them for a gift for a special project. And then I got to stay at home a little bit longer.
Josh, it reminds me, Chiz's comments remind me of Father Foley at Cristo Rey, who claims to this day that he never asked anyone for money. And he raised, 50, 60 million, Josh?
Yeah.
Never.
It's funny. I was thinking the exact same thing I was trying to go back in time. I was trying to think if I ever really, I think that there's, like every profession has the jokes about it. And it's like this, you just, you got to go hit them up for money. Like someone's an ATM machine. Like, yeah, just give me 200,000. Thank you. I'll check in with you later. There's a, the joke of that, but there's also sometimes there's a reality of it, like that even in the profession of the fundraising, sometimes going to be, well, I only raise 6-figure gifts. I only raise, like, I don't know. I don't know what I raise. I only know that exactly what Chiz said, is about relationships. And that if you are passionate about your mission, you are passionate about the work you're involved in, and people are going to be drawn to that because whether it's because they're alumni of a school or because they believe in helping more children have access to it, or because whatever it is, you're saving dogs from whatever. I mean, whatever that is, if you're passionate about it, people are going to want to be a part of it as well. And I mean, I had no formal training in fundraising except for Father Foley, where I learned, this is about relationships. I never viewed any of these people as as a target. Some of these folks that I met when I was at Cristo Rey 25 years ago, some of my closest friends, and it is about relationships. And to Chiz's point, that I always to put a little saying to it, when the apple is ripe, it will fall.
Yeah.
That generally people that are there want to be involved. They wouldn't be sitting around the table or engaged if they didn't want to be involved.
Yeah.
And when they hear something that piques their interest, Chiz is passionate. I watched and saw some of it, his passion for Salisbury and the young men that came to schools and the education and, even the part of the chapel and the values. And I've seen some of his speeches, and, it was hard not to be excited with that. So someone watching that would say, gosh, this person's doing a great job. I can see the vision he has for the future. I want to be part of that. Chiz, we were thinking, you said, I think that's more how it works than anything.
Yep.
I recognize, in some of our elementary Catholic schools, it's growing. The high schools generally have a much, more well-established. That's not all Catholic elementary schools, but increasingly it's growing, and it's getting. We see them. We work with them very much on digitizing their records first and foremost. So taking all those paper records and getting whatever is 1,000 or 20,000 their alumni records into a database. And then consistently sending messaging, not asking for money, but this is a school you went to. Here's what it looks like today. Here's who's serving. Here are the programs we have going on. Here are some of the things we're working on, and consistently. And I would say the other thing is we've worked hard at is data, more data, and outcomes. Yeah. Show me that and I would say the school sometimes, again, all of us, you get nervous, is this good or am I not doing well? I don't feel like I'm doing. I have. My experience is that whether it's good or bad, if you have a plan that you're going this way, then people will say, let me help you get there. And I think that's why it's important to share the data and the outcomes so that you can say in our plan, if we had a graduation rate of X, we want it to be Y. Here's the things we're doing. We're looking for help to add more supports to the students, whatever that might be. But I think being open and transparent lends to people saying we want to be involved and support that.
That's interesting.
Rob, the greatest, real quick, I think the greatest, the most meaningful ask I ever made, I didn't ever ask. We were a boys' school, and as such, we were able to educate the sons of our faculty and staff for free, which was a huge benefit if you had, if you're a family with three boys. But the daughters we couldn't educate. And therefore, there was an inequity there that I didn't like. And over the years, we lost some families who had a number of daughters who moved on to schools where their daughters could be educated for free at co-ed schools. So over a number of years, I just said, this is one of my ideas that I want to achieve before I leave. And it was to create a fund to support the private education of daughters of faculty and staff members. And one day, a trustee, a guy on our board, just said, "Look, I've been thinking about you. I've heard you talk about this a couple of times. I got you." And he had a family foundation that was aligned with what we wanted to do, and that was it. It was done. The fund for daughters was fully subscribed. I mean, fully funded, and the lift that it gave our faculty and staff was incredible.
That's interesting.
And they were
a vision and a response.
It's hard to raise money for endowment. It's harder, I should say, to raise money for endowment. It's a lot easier when you have a building that someone can put their name on, or But this was so meaningful to me because it helped our faculty and staff. It helped our family, and it was really a great moment.
Well, guys.
Just real quick question, and Chiz maybe too. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I observe often, sometimes, there's a person as a principal who I've observed is very successful because it's just natural and it's innate to them to fundraise. They don't know they're fundraising. They're passionate about their mission. They're constantly establishing their vision and people coming involved. And there's others I've watched on the job who say, well, I'm not really a fundraiser. I'm not good at it. I don't know what I'm doing. And there's almost like this mystique about it. And I've often tried to give advice or thoughts, but what would you say to a principal that came in and, very effective principal, strong leader, not a good fundraiser? How would you, advise them to start to build or to grow into that?
It's a great question, Josh. Chiz, you want to take it first?
Yeah. I have kind of a couple ideas. One, I think that there are organizations where you can go to workshops that can teach you how to do this. There are organizations that you can hire who can come to your school and kind of work with you on this. I think it's no one. Very few people asking for money comes naturally to very few people.
Yeah.
Sometimes to get that ask out, I need $1 million gift, is like you're sweating. I remember being a young head of school, and it doesn't come naturally. But it does come with practice, and it gets easier. If you fear it and therefore avoid it, you're never going to be any good at it.
There you go.
Sometimes it helps to have a partner who, maybe a member of your board or to go with you, and so that you don't have the full burden on your shoulders. But it's about what we have been talking about. It's about getting out, having those conversations, and building relationships. And again, if you're really passionate about what you do and you love your school and your mission and your kids, that's 90% of it. I mean, but being able to articulate that to the donor.
Yeah.
90% of it. And very often you won't even have to ask for that. The donor will say, as you said, Josh, how can I help you? And when you hear the how can I help you, you're there.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the Catholic school world, Josh, there's a great book I would recommend by Henry Nouwen called The Spirituality of Fundraising. It's a short, small book that any new principal or president should read, and it talks about fundraising as part of your prayer life, as your spirituality. It's to Chiz's point, if you believe in the mission, you want to spread this. You want everyone to hear about it and know about it. And Chiz's idea of a board member, I remember John Father Foley would often have Rosemary Krogan with him.
Yes.
And that's a great idea, Chiz, of having a board member go with you and sort of soften it.
It's also, in my graduate work, I took a class in negotiations, and it's helpful sometimes to have the 2-on-1.
Yeah.
In a soft way, not that you're ganging up, but it makes you more effective sometimes when you don't have to carry the conversation, when you can play off each other. So if you establish a good, strong relationship with a member of your board, or even another donor of your school who can kind of cajole a fellow alumnus or a fellow parent, or hey, please join me, or please join us in this mission.
That's
in this effort.
Guys, I think
one other thing, just to tag on, I think it's a good reminder for a lot of things in life, but the saying that something like "show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities." I think for all of us, me included, looking backward at your calendar, and if you are saying I'm not a natural fundraiser, or I don't feel comfortable doing it, Chiz, you said something about it, like it does become easier. That even if it's an hour, 2 hours a week, you say, I'm just going to focus on fundraising. And to your point, it might be sending an email, making a phone call, but forcing you to set aside time consistently, it becomes more natural. And I think, I often look back at my own calendar and say, what have I been doing the last 6 months? Judas Priest, get your act together. It's humbling to look at. My priorities are X, and X isn't even involved in my calendar. So I do think that it's a great example.
Well, gentlemen, we could go on. We haven't even gotten to half of our subjects yet. So I'm going to propose this is part 1 of 2 podcasts. I'm not even asking you guys permission, but I'm going to say we're going to do a second one in a few weeks. So for our listeners, we've got a lot more that we want to cover, but time is coming short here. And Josh knows this. He's already had this question, but Chiz, we ask every guest one final question. And so we're going to ask you it. Who is your greatest teacher and why?
I would say my father is my greatest teacher. He was a schoolman, career educator. Started out in the classroom and on the athletic field as a baseball coach. He spent the better part of 50 years in independent schools, and and did a lot of fundraising. And this was at a school called Hotchkiss School, and he wound up being the headmaster late in his career. And he just was so consistent and loved the students and had great expectations and led the way that kids followed. And to this day, I meet these men who are men and women, but Hotchkiss was a boys' school through about 1974. So the older alumni are all men. And they would say, your father's the greatest guy. He taught me X, Y, and Z. And I would walk through fire for him, or I would eat through the locker room door to go on the athletic fields and play for him. And that kind of loyalty, that kind of just, he was wonderful. And he's still alive, thank gosh. He's 89 years old and still remembers. We were having dinner the other night, and he was telling a story about his father playing football in college and still remembered his father's football coach's name, which must have been in like 1926. And I was like, oh my goodness. But just great values and always instilling values in kids and doing things the right way.
That's awesome. Well, just thank you for joining us in the next class. Josh, welcome back. Look forward to continuing the discussion with you guys in a few weeks on another episode. To our listeners, thank you for joining us again. And we hope you will listen to the second segment of Josh and Chiz.